This is the view that I decided to paint during my trip to Spain. Santiago de Compostela is a well-known UNESCO heritage site. I'm not going to explain all of the history of it, but it's where the Way of Saint James or Camino de Santiago ends. This is where the saint is buried, and you can find a lot of information about Santiago de Compostela in the web. The old town in Santiago de Compostela has the cathedral right almost at the middle, at the center of town. And I was actually walking around and went to this park, Parque San Domingos de Bonavale. And my view from there, because it's in a high level ground, you could see the city or the old village of Santiago de Compostela, and of course the towers of the cathedral. To draw the sketch, once you know the view that you want to paint, I use a reference photo, and also when I'm at the site, I also look at the scene. But it's very useful because I've been actually recently breaking down or dividing my surface sketchbook, and I'm using this particular paper that already has some dividers. So it's very useful for me to count proportional to the 9 by 12 painting that I want to do. And then I break it down in four. Uh, when you do this, or at least when I do this, it's easier for me to see what's in each quadrant and how I place the different elements. It was important for me with a single pencil that I had to make sure that I got the shapes in the right position, or roughly in the right position, in the right place, and roughly of the right proportions, although I think the tower is a bit bigger than it should be, but making sure that the big leaves that are close to me are going to be the right size in this composition. So having decided on the view that I wanted to paint, and having had the reference photo and the sketch, I went back to the hotel and I did set up my travel kit for starting the painting in acrylics. I was staying at the Convento de San Francisco Monumento. I have several travel kits. This is the smallest one. I will place some links below on where I got this one in particular. What I like about this small travel kit I had for acrylics is the size. It's 9 by 12. It's the same size that I use when I am going to do plein air painting and I don't have much space, or that I know that I'm going to carry a lot of weight on my back. So things that you need to consider is the size 9 by 12, because I also use the 9 by 12 palette, disposable palettes, and the 9 by 12 canvas. It's usually canvas pad when I travel. That makes it much easier because everything is on the same size. This particular travel kit I like because it's a transparent plastic box. This box has two clasps. They're plastic clasps that open up, and that's the way that you can open this case. It also has a handle that you can technically use for carrying on your kit. And the kit has almost everything you need. I have tailored a few things that are really very easy to do at your home if you find this a good idea. One thing that I like is that it's clear, transparent plastic. So if you use this either as a carry-on, you can pull it out from your carry-on so they can see all the tubes that you carry. These are 20 ml tubes, so you can bring them carry-on. But you can also put it in your suitcase and check it. If you do this, it's convenient to have a little note of what this is, usually noticing that they're acrylic artist colors. And sometimes I also add non-flammable. Sometimes people don't realize that acrylics are not flammable. So this is the travel kit. When you open the travel kit, what I do is if I'm sitting in a restaurant or on a table in the hotel or on a particular place where I can find something that I can lean the back on, then I can use it as an easel. I place my canvas pad. As you can see there, it's a 9 by 12 canvas pad, same size as the travel kit. In this case, it's linen. that has been primed for both oil and acrylic. And this is an acrylic travel kit. So I can place it there. I have been thinking of using tape also as hinges so that I can hold it open in case that I'm sitting on a park bench. But bottom line is that you can have sort of a tabletop easel with this little case when you open it. You can pull out the transparent tray that brings the paints of the tubes and the palette knife. There's 3 brushes, 1 pencil, and then surfaces for mixing. Although I don't use that much, I prefer to use the the disposable palettes that I'm going to talk about. So when you pull out the tray, you have now the colors and your utensils very close by, and you have the surface where I actually tape before I travel a disposable paper palette. I've been recently using the ones that are gray tone. You can use them several times, or you can actually tape a bunch of them and just dispose of them as you paint along. The good thing is you can prepare them at home before you travel, and you are ready to have sort of a ready-made studio in your own backpack. I always carry paper towel and of course containers where you can put the water. So that's why you need to find a place where you have water nearby, or bring a bottle of water that you can use for filling up these containers. It's important to have them because the acrylic paints do need you to be taking care of those brushes a lot. It doesn't look like it, but this particular kit I've been using now for maybe a year, and I've been changing the tubes of color. I can actually use much less colors, and what I'm thinking eventually is to have several small tubes of the colors that I use. I like to use limited palettes, but this gave me the advantage of having other colors that I normally don't use when I do plein air. San Francisco Hotel Monumento is a hotel that's very well located close to the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. It seems to have been originated in the year of 1214. And what you can see there, that's the hotel, and that's the entrance of the hotel, is a black door. And by the side of the hotel is the church that's still an acting church and you can visit. Inside the hotel, there are several courtyards. And I'm showing this because in one of them, there's this very nice area that you can walk around, and they have placed several very convenient seats with tables. And that's where I was sitting to do my sketches and to do my first paintings in acrylic after I went out and decided what I wanted to paint. To begin the painting, I used burnt sienna, acrylic, diluted with water, to first place the big elements, mark the horizontal line, mark the verticals that were important, and especially in this particular composition, we have the framing of all the leaves around, and some of them should be really dark. I liked for this particular composition using the linen canvas, which is from Senso, that's primed for both acrylic and oils, and it's not white. It's actually a warm neutral tone. It helps me establish the darks and the whites better, and I like that it has the warmer tone. That's the same reason why I also liked using the burnt sienna for this first stage of placing the big elements in the composition. The tower of that church was important. And of course, Santiago de Compostela, the cathedral, is in the way in the back, but it's an important element in the composition. Once I had roughly the key elements with the burnt sienna, I mixed a dark color with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And I did apply it still very light. It should be more transparent, and you should always do very lean washes at the beginning. But I'm starting to build layers. And I put the darkest darks where I was seeing them and where I wanted them so that I could pop up the brightest brights. At this stage, the tower was still not as dark as it should be, although we should remember how we saw the scene in real life because the photographs tend to make that a little darker. So I had to make sure that I remembered, the atmospheric perspective at the end. However, at this stage, it is important to darken things first because both with acrylics and oils, it's always easier to apply the opaque lights on top of the darks. So eventually, I'm going to make it darker and then I will start making it lighter with different layers of color. I did apply then a bit more of the darker color in the back, but it's already mixed with a little bit of white. I don't know if you can notice, but the leaf, for instance, on the front right is a true transparent black, dark color that I mixed with no white, whereas going a bit on the back, I've already started pulling out the whites. I like not to bring the white color until I have the foundations of the darks first. And talking about the white, I also at this stage started carving out some of the shapes using the sky color. So if you can see, there's blue with a lot of white. On the very top is ultramarine blue. Then I started mixing a bit of the phthalo blue that I had in the kit. And then going down is basically all very light yellow and white. So that gives a bit more of an idea of the atmospheric light on the sky, and it also was helping me establish the darks and lights early on. This is as far as I got with the acrylics, and then I started working in back in my place with oils. I created this painting using water-soluble oils. I use artisan Winsor Newton linseed oil as needed when the paints need to be a bit more fluid and more buttery. For the colors, I used the Lukas Berlin 20 ml set. This set comes with titanium white, lemon yellow, cadmium yellow hue, yellow ochre, vermilion hue, alizarin crimson hue, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, viridian hue, and burnt umber. I used a disposable palette. It's a 9 by 12 and it has a gray tone color. And I placed the Lukas Berlin colors with the yellows on the bottom, the reds on the top, and the blues on the right. The white on the left, separate from all of the rest. And I used a palette knife to make some pre-mixes of colors that I knew I would need for this particular painting. That saves a bit of time, and it's always good to have these pre-mixed colors as reference for when you're going to sit down or stand up and start painting. Two kinds of brushes that I recommend for painting with oils. The Mimik Hog or the Hog are used for the first layers. They can hold a lot of paint, and it's easy to first do your first layers on the canvas. And then the synthetics. This particular brand of Simply Simmons are very useful. I find them very easy to handle, easy to clean, and they do hold the shape. So this is the way that the acrylic base was looking once I established the composition and the darker darks. And my first stage with the oils included adding some of the grayish mixes that I had prepared for the back buildings, remembering always where is your light source. So you put the cooler grays on the area that's shaded and the warmer grays in the areas that are more light. They are all actually not saturated colors, and there's a lot of white in the mixes to push them back, as opposed to the photo, which shows these buildings darker, but if I did that in the painting, it would look odd. It would look like they're closer. So in order to make them farther, I used those areas. I also did not want to go too much into the details, so you will see that a lot of the colors are the same in the back, and there's no details. In addition, I established the lights on the wall in the particular park. There's a wall and the very dark door that was a good element, visual element. And of course, the fence. The fence to me was an important horizontal element as opposed to the darker vertical elements that I'm going to have with the crown of leaves, let's say, or the framing of the leaves. Also, I started establishing some of the greens. So from this step, I went to this second step. What I did here was to start placing some of the darks and lights on the leaves. This was a very challenging painting for me. I've never done these leaves that are lit from behind. I thought it was a very interesting exercise, but it did take me several passes of how to do this. Fortunately, with oils, you can build the layers and it actually looks good. But this was challenging to me because you should not blend them. You try to put them right one on top of the other or next to each other. So I started working on those leaves, also the roofs of the houses, making sure that they continued. And again, they are very grayed out and not saturated because they're far. The other thing was in the front, I did add more of the whitish colors, but I realized that I was using too much white too soon. Although I wanted to make the contrast between the light and dark colors. And then this particular wall had a lot of contrast between the light and dark. So from this particular image, I went to this image where I corrected the placing of that wall that was too high. And importantly, the door was not where I had been painting it. It was closer to me, and there was a tree. I want to make you notice that tree was a very sort of orangey autumn color. And I tried using orange, but I realized that orange would bring it closer. So that's why I decided to use more of a pinkish color with a little crimson, yellow ochre, and a lot of white. So the tree is just positioned in the same place, but it's not orange because I want to bring the oranges later in the painting. An important thing was the particular area from those leaves. It was too dark. I made them a bit less dark, but also that particular leaf was way too big in the original. It was occupying too much space and it was drawing too much of attention. So I worked a bit more on that contrast. There was something that I was not liking. So you always have to think and go back to what is it that you liked about the original image. And not only the composition, which I really liked, I was crouching in under these trees to get this particular image, but I also liked the colors, and I was not getting the colors correct. The shades were difficult because this was around noontime, so you can see there's not much shades. It's coming from the top more than the top left. And I was having a lot of trouble conveying the colors and the brightness of those greens and all those oranges. So I had to go back to my painting and make sure that I corrected those. Also, another learning is get your drawing right from the beginning. I think my sketch was better than the start of my painting. The fact that I had to change the position of the wall, that I had to change the size of the tower, that I had to change the size of those leaves, it just makes you upset when you're painting and you're not getting things right. And the other thing that I want to make note is that the particular fence is really in the shade. So it shouldn't be as bright as I had originally painted it. And by graying it or making it cooler, it's going to bring the warmer, lighter tones of, bright areas into view in a much easier way. So this is how I had it, and this is how I ended up finishing the painting. So what happened here? I brightened up the sky. I also brightened up the building on the back, and I did the sky hole painting or the negative painting for the tower, the bell tower. This also allowed me to cool down that fence with more violets so that the rest of the painting would have the golden orangey tones and impasto application on the front, looking much brighter and better. So that's what I also did for the leaves. I made sure that I had darkened again and making more reddish tones and dark greens before I applied the impasto brush strokes for the bright yellows. The same thing on the right. I used more of the dark colors on the right because that particular wall would be better or easier to see if I had the dark areas in the front. This is a final painting. I'm very happy with it. It's definitely different colors from what I saw there, but I ended up liking this golden tone. And the painting is Santiago de Compostela from the Bonavale Park. Thank you very much. And if you enjoyed the painting, subscribe and like, and you can see all of the materials that I used in the description below.